Hey, what's up, guys? So, back here with another video. Never mind the noise, it's a bit windy out here on my balcony, things are going on. But this is my little intro to let you guys know what we're about to be talking about today. Uh, take a little break from the, humidor uploads and try and get you guys some more conversational, some deeper content. So this is another Smoke and Talk, and today we're going to be talking about a subject near and dear to my heart and very close to all of us as cigar smokers. Xeno Platinum per the usual. But talking about whiskey and like the state of the American whiskey market. And I'm going to be doing that using two whiskeys that I just picked up this weekend while I was on vacation. I actually literally just got home like an hour ago today, but this is going to be one of those whiskeys. Jack Daniel's 12 year. I've been searching for this whiskey for about 5 months, and I finally was able to get it at a fair price. I didn't get it at SRP, but we'll get into that in a second. Okay, guys, so the whiskeys that we're going to be using today as an example for the conversation that we're about to have is Jack Daniel's 12 year and K-Luke Toasted Barrel Rye Batch 3. So, first, we're going to talk about the Jack Daniels to get into the actual subject today. I actually just picked this up on vacation like 2 days ago. It is currently Sunday, June 30th. So I picked this up on Friday, the 28th. And I didn't pay SRP for it, right? We all know, at least we should know, SRP on this bottle right here is $95. We also all should know that getting it for $95 requires some sacrifice, some connections, and a whole lot of luck, right? So I've been looking for this for a while. I had some places that I could find it online for, I mean, a relatively reasonable price compared to some of the stuff that was going on online based off of this whiskey. But I actually did not pull the trigger because it was still priced well out of my comfort zone. Now, as you guys can see with my cigar collections and whatnot, I'm no stranger to spending money, and whiskey was actually something I was into not before I was into cigars, but in terms of the whole collection thing and, you know, tatering out for prices and stuff like that. This was just what I was into before I decided to actually make a cigar collection. So this is neither one of these, by the way. This is actually Jack Daniel's Bonded Rye, which have been sitting in my collection for a minute. And, you know, I'm not a fan of 100 proof whiskeys as much. I don't mind them. That's about as low as I'll go. But I typically tend to go for cask strength, barrel proof, full proof, etc. So yeah, I had been checking for this bottle for a long time. I had went on a vacation. I wouldn't even really call it a vacation, just out of town for an event. And I just happened to find it, right? First store I was actually about to check out with a Larceny C923. And I happened to look up because I was like, damn, the store doesn't have any allocated bottles. But I happened to look up behind the counter and it was all the allocated bottles. The first thing that caught my eye was actually a Michter's Toasted Barrel Rye. I asked him about it. He told me it was $300, and I almost said screw it and just checked out with the Larceny, but I happened to see the Jack 10 to its left side, and I looked to the right, and it was just Jack 12. So, you know, why not? I figured it was probably going to be like full-blown inflated secondary, but, you know, he looked at me and he said 200, and that was actually a reasonable price to me. So let me tell you guys why that was a reasonable price. One, the original is $95. That's the MSRP. And again, as we all know, you're not going to find this bottle for MSRP unless you are just very lucky or you have some backroom connections. I live in Pennsylvania, so we're a controlled state. There are no, what would you call it? There are no independent retailers, right? Every liquor store is a fine wine and good spirits. Every store is state controlled. So, and that's about a step behind our neighbor, Ohio, who's still state controlled, but you at least have independent retailers, right? So every store is pretty much the same. Every store basically has the same selection. You'll see, you know, minor differences here and there. Obviously, premium stores are where you're usually going to find the most expensive stuff or the most highly allocated bottles. Um, but yeah, with me being in PA, it is you're waiting on the state to get stuff, release stuff. The good news is you're likely to not pay much over MSRP, but you're also gonna have a pretty poor selection overall if you're really into stuff. And so ever since this came out in February, or March, one of the two. I'm pretty sure February is when they officially released the Jack 10 and 12 year. But ever since those been out, I've been looking for them. And like I said, I'd seen some places that had them. Plenty of places have them for $400 or $500 online. I seen a few that were around $350, and then it came down to $330, and then it came down to $300, and now those same places are down to $250, which kind of gets me into the overall conversation of we're going through a correction in the bourbon market, right? But before we get to that, the reason why I felt $200 was a fair price is because, in my case, being a PA, a controlled state, I have to go out of town to get a lot of allocated stuff, right? PA just doesn't have the greatest selection. So in a lot of cases, if I'm going out of state to shop for whiskey, to hunt for whiskey, let's say this is $95, not even counting tax. What I would spend on gas and food, and depending on how far I go, potentially even a hotel or something like that, because I like to hunt. I like to really go for it. Like, for me, it's fun to research and call around and take trips and drive and see new places and, you know, go at stuff. But if I actually do the math on bare minimum, if I'm just going to, say, Kentucky or Maryland, 4-hour trip both ways, etc., I'm wasting at least a full tank of gas. So right there, we're talking $60 to $80, right? In just gas. And we aren't talking about food either. So generally, by the time I've spent money on gas and food for whatever, you know, trip that I'm taking for this whiskey hunt or whatever, at that point, I've already spent another at least $100. Then you gotta have the luck to even find this at MSRP. So let's say I found it at MSRP and then spent another $100 on gas and food, right? Let alone my time, the time investment involved in it. And again, guys, I'm sorry for all the excess noise. It's nice outside, so people are out doing their thing. But yeah, when it comes to this, like, 200 is actually kind of light, right? Because if it was as simple as even just waking up early and waiting in line at a store on drop day, right, maybe then it's worth it. But even then, that's still hours out of my day, time, inconvenience, etc. But just simply traveling out of state to grab a bottle, hopefully at MSRP, you know, barring all the other factors like luck and whatever else, just gas and food, it's gonna amount up to what I paid for this bottle anyway. So for me, and I happen to be in the state of Delaware, which apparently doesn't have alcohol tax, $200 even is pretty much the same money I would have spent anyway going out of state to some random liquor store in the middle of God knows where to buy a bottle. So that's why when I seen this at 200, I didn't even flinch, I just bought it. Another thing you gotta take into consideration too is I didn't start off in bourbon or rye, right? I started off in scotch. Scotch was pretty much my first foray, like real heavy foray into whiskey. And being an American, scotch is expensive, right? You get import taxes and all this other stuff. So granted, scotch is usually relatively cheap in the UK, which is why nowadays I buy direct from the UK. A lot of times in America, if you're getting scotch directly from your store, it's marked up heavy because they had to pay import tax. They might even pay full price, and they're just trying to make a profit off of whatever it is that they actually are trying to sell you. So for me, $100 is on the low end for a bottle, right? And as I've gotten into bourbon and really got to explore and got into the depths, much like this, you know, Jack Daniel's Bonded Rye here, you'll find that, you know, $30, $40 usually gets you pretty good juice. That's not usually the case with scotch or Irish. Can you find some $30, $40 bottles of scotch and Irish? Yes. Can you find some decent $30 or $40 bottles of scotch and Irish? Yes. But is it likely that you're going to find something that's you know, gonna become your favorite or mind-blowing? No. Are you gonna find something at that range that's gonna stick with you the deeper you get into different types of scotches, different finishes, different producers, etc.? No, you're not. So when I came into the world of bourbon and realized that good bourbon typically starts at around 40 or 50 bucks, you know, it took me a minute to get there for real. But yeah, again, I paid 200 bucks for this bottle. And for me, that's fair because, you know, if I'm getting an Octomore or a limited edition Ardbeg or a limited edition Bruichladdich product, especially if I'm getting it shipped over from the UK, let alone buying it, you know, essentially secondhand in an American store, 200 bucks isn't much. Like 200 bucks is kind of where like the really, really good stuff starts. Even when I was out there in Delaware, I seen Blue Spot, which I have a couple bottles of Blue Spot already, but 150. Now, mind you, in PA, it's $95 if you can find it for that, right? You might see it once a year in stores down here, but 150. So you're paying that premium out of state, especially where they can mark stuff up. Kind of is what it is. So for me, again, 200, I was well into paying, you know, 150, 200, sometimes even more for a bottle of whiskey well before I got into bourbon. So even though I understand that this shouldn't have been $200 in the most general sense of things, based off of what the distiller feels like it's worth, I do understand that the market's the market. With that being said, the state of the bourbon market is in flux right now. You have some people wondering, are we headed for a reset of the market, a collapse of the bourbon market? Is the bourbon boom over, etc.? I can tell you, being somebody who invests heavily, the bourbon market's not going to collapse. We're at a point now where there's too many people who are enjoying this hobby of ours, that the bourbon boom is probably over, and there likely will be a market reset, and a heavy one at that. But I don't think the boom is going to be over, right? I think you got people who are tired of paying premiums for products that don't necessarily command the premiums that they're commanding right now. And I think you're gonna have distilling producers and even non-distilling producers who are gonna have excess, right? From playing catch up, trying to get ahead of the market, a market that they're probably well ahead of right now, but I think they realize that because I've seen tons of articles and videos about, you know, certain distilling producers and non-distilling producers selling stills, selling rick houses, selling as many barrels as they can get out from under. But in general, I think you're going to see an excess of supply, an excess of dissatisfied consumers who have been burned or who have paid well over retail, 3, 4, 5 times over retail, one too many times. And I think that's all going to come back to bite the whiskey market in the butt. But I think in the end, it's going to be a healthy thing, because any kind of pullback, if anybody here is familiar with the stock market or any other financial markets in general, I think you realize that pullbacks are healthy. Corrections are healthy for the market. You know, one of the things that led to this state of inflation right now is the fact that when the market should have corrected, when the market usually would have pulled back, it didn't, because we printed so much money that people didn't have to stop spending. Pullbacks and corrections didn't matter. You know, kind of like, you know, in the run-up to the Great Depression, or even to some extent the run-up to the Great Recession, you know, there was just an overabundance and way too much optimism in the markets, and way too much free-flowing money, way too many loans being handed out, way too much margin being exercised, and Thus, the market didn't correct what it naturally would have, and that's where we're at today. Now that correction's coming. So the real question, segueing into this bottle here, is that correction going to be bad for the little guys, the non-distilling producers, who don't necessarily have a strong foothold, as well as the upstart distillers, right? So K-Luke is a non-distilling producer. It's family owned. It's a husband and wife combo. I'm not gonna get too heavy into the story of K-Luke. The name K-Luke is a blend of the names of their sons, which I believe is like Kevin and Lucas or something like that. The husband and wife duo, their names are Jonathan and Jennifer. I'm not 100% sure of their last names, but K-Luke is a brand that I've recently been turned on to in the past 6 or so months, and I've had nothing but good experiences. I have their batch 8 bourbon, I have their batch 2 toasted barrel bourbon, and this is their batch 3 toasted barrel rye. Haven't had a chance to try either of these, by the way, but I will be cracking both of these sometime this week. It makes you wonder if brands like K-Luke are going to have a place in the market. Now, somebody like K-Luke, they're non-distilling producers, and in fact, they don't even contract distill like with other companies. They actually just, the husband and wife, they buy barrels and then they blend them. I believe Jonathan's like a level 3 sommelier or whatever the case is, and supposedly he's tasted like some ungodly amount of barrels or whatever, and I will say his palate is superb because I haven't had a bad dram of anything K-Luke branded, and I'm actually heavily looking forward to this ride. But it makes you wonder if little guys like K-Luke, little known brands especially, are going to be okay in the long run, right? If the bourbon collapse does happen, right? I think they will be, just because they buy barrels, so they don't have, from what I understand, they don't have a ton of stock at any given time, and so I don't think they have too much overhead when it comes to this whiskey thing, right? But another company, maybe like Green River, for example, I think Green River will be fine based off of the success they're having now. I think they're building a lot of rapport with customers, but it's a situation where legacy brands like Jack Daniels will be fine, but smaller distilleries, smaller producers, like K-Luke, like Green River, and like a lot of these other craft whiskeys, could get pushed out and die off, right? It happened with the quote-unquote collapse of the craft beer market. But it is interesting. But yeah, so back to the original topic. I see a lot of people who, they're purists, and they frown upon, right, anybody who pays over the MSRP for anything, right? And then you have your taters who will pay whatever to get the newest, latest, and greatest based off of what, Fred Minnick or Bourbon Junkies or whoever says. And then you have guys like me who are just living their lives. They're in the middle, right? And then you weigh the pros and cons. So, like I said, with this, $200 made sense for me. Because if I had to travel to Kentucky, if I had to travel deep into Ohio, if I had to travel deep into Maryland or Michigan or whatever, in order to find a bottle of this at MSRP, then just in gas and food, I'm paying that same price. Now, maybe, just maybe, you might say, well, yeah, but at least you get to travel and see new places and meet other people and network and this, that, and the third, and you get the thrill of the hunt, and you say you like to drive, and yeah, and I get all that experience that comes along with spending that extra money. In my case, it still made sense because I was out of state. I was already in a new place, and I was already spending money on other things. So ultimately, $200 still would have made sense, because where else am I going to find this for under $200? And that'll ship to PA. And even if I find it for between say 150 and 180, which is I think is the lowest you'll see on secondary or any place that'll actually ship to you that still has it in stock. Well, now you add in shipping and tax, and now I'm right back up to 200 anyway. So again, it just made sense. But yeah, that was my little talk slash rant for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. How much would you pay for a bottle of Jack Daniel's 12? What's in your budget, you know, and what actually logically makes sense for you? And that's another thing too. This $200 is well within my budget. So let me know, guys. Drop a comment, like, subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you guys next time.